Henry wiped the dust from his hands as he climbed down from the attic ladder. At 82 years old, packing up their family home was harder than he had expected. His wife Rose was downstairs, carefully wrapping their wedding china in newspaper. They had lived in this house for 58 years, and now it was time to move to Sunny Meadows Care Home. The old wooden box felt heavy in Henry's arms as he carried it down the narrow stairs. He had found it pushed far back behind boxes of Christmas decorations. Covered in years of dust and spider webs, the box looked very old, with brass corners that had turned green with age. Henry set the box on the kitchen table where Rose was, working. She looked up from wrapping a teacup and smiled at him. Her silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight coming through the window. Even at 79, she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "What did you find up there, my dear?" Rose asked, looking at the mysterious box. "I am not sure," Henry replied, brushing more dust off the wooden lid. It was hidden way back in the corner. "I have never seen it before." Henry carefully opened the box. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, wrapped in faded blue cloth, were old photographs, yellowed letters tied with ribbon, and several official-looking documents. The smell of old paper and lavender filled the air. Rose stopped wrapping the teacup. Her face had gone completely white. She stood up so quickly that her chair nearly fell over. Henry picked up one of the photographs. It showed a young woman who looked remarkably like Rose. But she was standing with people he had never seen before. The woman in the photo wore a dark coat and had sad eyes. Behind her stood a man and woman who might have been her parents. "Rose, who are these people?" Henry asked, holding up the photograph. "This woman looks just like you when you were young." Rose's hands began to shake. She reached out and touched the photograph with trembling fingers. Tears started to fill her blue eyes. Henry picked up one of the documents. It was written in what looked like German or another foreign language. At the top, he could make out a name: Ellen Whitmore. The document looked very official, with stamps and signatures. "Rose, what is this?" Henry asked gently. "Why is there a box with someone else's name on these papers hidden in our attic?" Rose walked slowly to her favorite armchair by the fireplace. It was the same chair where she had rocked their children to sleep and where she sat every evening to read. She sank into it heavily, as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders. "Henry," she whispered, her voice barely loud enough to hear, "please sit down. I need to tell you something that I should have told you 60 years ago." Henry felt his heart start to beat faster. In all their years together, he had never seen Rose look so frightened. He sat down in his own chair across from her, still holding the mysterious photograph. "My real name is not Rose Miller," she said, looking down at her hands. "It is Eleanor Whitmore. I have been living with a secret my whole life." The room became very quiet. Henry could hear the old clock on the mantel ticking. He could hear cars passing by on the street outside. But inside the house, time seemed to stop. "I do not understand," Henry said softly. "What do you mean your name is not Rose?" Ellen looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "I was born in London during the war. My family helped Jewish children escape from the Nazis. We would hide them in our house, and then help them get to safe places with new families." Henry listened carefully, trying to understand what his wife was telling him. The woman he had loved for 60 years, the mother of his children, the grandmother of his grandchildren, was telling him she was someone completely different. "When I was 18 years old, soldiers came to our house one night," Eleanor continued. "My parents told me to run. They gave me false papers with the name Rose Miller on them. I escaped through the back garden, while my parents were taken away by the soldiers." Henry felt like the world was spinning round him. everything he thought. He knew about his life, about his marriage, about the woman sitting across from him, was suddenly different. "I came to this town with nothing except those false papers," Eleanor said. "I was scared and alone. I promised myself that I would never speak about my past because I was afraid it might bring danger to anyone I came to love." Henry stared at his wife, trying to process what she had told him. All these years, she had carried this heavy secret alone. All these years, while they shared meals and raised children and grew old together, she had been protecting him from a truth that might have changed everything. The afternoon sun was setting now, casting long shadows across their living room, the same living room where they had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where they had argued and made up, where they had lived their entire married life together. Now, Henry wondered if he had ever really known the woman he loved at all. Henry woke up early the next morning to the sound of quiet sobbing coming from the kitchen. He found Eleanor sitting at the table where they had opened the wooden box the day before. The old photographs were spread out in front of her, and tears were falling onto the faded images. Henry had not slept well. All night, he had stared at the ceiling, thinking about what Eleanor had told him. The woman he had shared his bed with for 60 years was not who he thought she was. Her real name was Eleanor Whitmore, not Rose Miller. She had lived through the war. She had helped children escape from danger. Without saying a word, Henry put the kettle on to boil. He took out Eleanor's favorite teacup, the one with small blue flowers painted on it. He had given it to her for their first wedding anniversary. He made her tea exactly the way she liked it, with 2 spoons of sugar and a splash of milk. Eleanor looked up when Henry set the cup beside her. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She had been awake all night too, probably wondering if telling him the truth had been a terrible mistake. "Thank you," she whispered. Wrapping her hands round the warm cup, Henry sat down in the chair next to her. He did not speak. He had learned over 60 years of marriage that sometimes the best thing to do was simply wait and listen. Eleanor picked up one of the photographs. It showed a group of children standing in front of a large house. The children looked scared, but they were trying to smile for the camera. "I was part of a group that helped children hide from the Nazis," Eleanor began, her voice shaking. "There were 6 of us. We were all very young, but we knew we had to do something to help." She pointed to different children in the photograph. "We would take them to safe houses in the countryside. We gave them new names and new families who would pretend they were their own children. It was very dangerous work." Henry studied the faces of the children. Some looked to be only 4 or 5 years old. Others were older, maybe 10 or 11. All of them looked frightened, even when they were trying to smile. "How many children did you help?" Henry asked quietly. Eleanor wiped her eyes with a tissue. 43 children. I remember every single one of their faces. I saved 43 children before everything went wrong." She picked up another photograph. This one showed a little girl with dark curls and big brown eyes. The girl was holding a small stuffed rabbit. "This little girl was named Lucy," Eleanor said, touching the photograph gently. "She was only 5 years old when her parents brought her to us. She was so scared that she would not let go of that little rabbit. I held her hand while we walked to the safe house." Eleanor showed Henry another picture. This boy was named James. He was 7 years old and very brave. He helped take care of the younger children. He would tell them stories to keep them from being afraid. Henry felt his heart breaking as he looked at the innocent faces in the photographs. These children had been in terrible danger, and young Eleanor had risked her own life to save them. "I gave them hope when they had none," Eleanor continued. "I told them that they would see their families again someday. I told them that the war would end and everything would be okay. I do not know if I believed it myself, but I had to give them something to hold on to. Eleanor put down the photographs and looked directly at Henry. I was barely 18 years old, but I felt responsible for all of them every night. I would lie awake worrying about whether they were safe. Henry tried too. Imagine his young wife doing such dangerous work. Eleanor had always been gentle and kind, but he had never realized how brave she was. One night in November, everything changed. Eleanor said, her voice becoming even quieter. Soldiers came to our house. My father heard them coming up the front steps. He told my mother and me to run out the back door immediately. Eleanor stood up and walked to the kitchen window. She looked out at their small garden, where roses still bloomed even though autumn was coming. My parents had prepared for this moment. They kept false papers hidden in a secret place. My father grabbed the papers and pushed them into my hands. The name on them was Rose Miller. Henry watched his wife standing by the window. Even now, 80 years old and safe in their own kitchen, she looked frightened remembering that night. I ran through our back garden and jumped over the fence into the neighbor's yard. I could hear shouting behind me, but I did not look back. My parents had told me to run, so I ran. Eleanor returned to her chair and picked up her teacup. Her hands were still shaking. I hid in a church until morning. Then I got on a train heading as far away from London as possible. I ended up in this little town with nothing except the false papers and the clothes I was wearing. Eleanor looked at Henry with tears in her eyes. I never saw my parents again. I never found out what happened to them. I came to this town with nothing but the name Rose Miller and a promise to myself that I would never look back. Henry reached across the table and took Eleanor's hand in his for the first time in 60 years of marriage. He truly did not know what to say to his wife. Henry stared at the telephone for a long time before picking it up. His hands felt heavy as he dialed William's number. Their eldest son lived only 20 minutes away with his wife and 2 children. Henry had never called him with an urgent request before. William, can you and Emma come over today? Your mother and I need to speak with both of you about something very important. Henry said when his son answered. Is everything all right? Dad, are you or Mum sick? William asked. Very clear in his voice. We are both healthy, but please come as soon as you can, and ask Emma to come too. This is something we need to discuss as a family. Henry hung up the phone and found Eleanor still sitting at the kitchen table. She had not moved from that spot since their conversation that morning. The old photographs were still spread out in front of her like pieces of a puzzle she was trying to solve. I called the children. Henry said quietly, they will be here this afternoon. Eleanor looked up at him with frightened eyes. What if they hate me for lying to them their whole lives? What if they never forgive me? Henry sat down beside her. They love you, Eleanor. They will be shocked, but they love you 2 hours later. William arrived with his sister Emma. William was 45 years old and worked as a teacher at the local school. Emma was 42 and had 3 children of her own. Both of them looked worried as they came into the house. What is going on? Emma asked, giving her mother a hug. Dad sounded very serious on the phone. Eleanor took a deep breath. She had practiced what she would say, but now that her children were here, the words felt stuck in her throat. Please sit down, Eleanor said. I need to tell you something about my past that I have never told anyone before. William and Emma sat on the sofa across from their parents. They looked at each other with confusion. Their mother had always been open with them about everything. Eleanor began the same way she had with Henry. She told them about her real name, about the war, about helping children escape from danger. She showed them the photographs and explained who the people in the pictures were. William listened without saying a word until Eleanor finished speaking. Then he stood up quickly, his face red with anger. "How could you lie to us our whole lives, Mom?" William said, his voice loud and harsh. "Everything we know about our family is fake. Who are we really? What else have you been hiding from us?" Emma was quieter, but Henry could see that she was just as upset. "I do not understand, Mom. Why could you not trust us with the truth? We are your children. We had a right to know who you really are." Eleanor felt tears running down her face. "I wanted to protect you both. I was afraid that if people knew about my past, it might bring danger to our family. I thought I was keeping you safe." "Safe from what?" William asked. "The war ended before we were even born. What danger could there possibly be now?" Eleanor tried to explain, but William was too angry to listen. "Our whole lives have been built on a lie. How do we know what is real and what is not? How do we know you are even really our mother?" Emma gasped. "William, that is a terrible thing to say, is it?" William asked. "We do not even know her real name. Maybe she has other children somewhere that we do not know about. Maybe she has another husband." Eleanor stood up, her heart breaking at her son's words. "William, please. Everything about our family is real. The only thing that was not real was my name. I have always been your mother. I have always loved you and Emma more than anything in the world." But William was already walking toward the door. "I need time to think about this. I need to figure out who my mother really is." After William left, Emma stayed for another hour. She was gentler than her brother, but Henry could see that she was deeply hurt too. "I wish you had trusted us, Mom," Emma said before she left. "We could have helped you carry this secret. You did not have to bear it alone." That night, for the first time in their 6 years of marriage, Henry slept in the guest room. He told Eleanor he needed space to think, but the truth was that he felt lost. How could the woman he had shared his bed with for so long be a stranger to him? The next few days were the hardest of Eleanor's life. Every morning, she and Henry sat at the kitchen table drinking tea in complete silence. Their evening walks, which they had taken together every day for 40 years, became tense and uncomfortable. William did not call or visit. Emma came by once. But the conversation was awkward and painful. Both children seemed to be avoiding their parents, unsure how to process what they had learned. Eleanor spent long hours looking through the old photographs, remembering faces she had tried so hard to forget. She thought about Lucy, the 5-year-old girl with the stuffed rabbit. She thought about James, the brave 7-year-old boy. She wondered if telling the truth about her past had been a terrible mistake. Maybe some secrets were meant to stay buried forever. Maybe she should have taken this story to her grave and let her family continue believing the lie that had protected them for so long. The house felt different now. It felt colder, even though spring was coming and flowers were beginning to bloom. In their garden, a family that had been close and loving for 60 years was now drifting apart, all because of words that could never be taken back. Henry lay awake in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 3 in the morning, but sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Eleanor's face when she told him about her past. He heard her voice saying the names of the children she had saved. Lucy, James, 43 children. For 5 nights, Henry had barely slept. During the day, he moved through the house like a ghost. He made tea for Eleanor in the morning, but they barely spoke. She would sit at the kitchen table looking through the old photographs, and he would read the newspaper without really seeing the words. On the 6th morning, Henry made a decision. He got dressed early and walked to the town library. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, had known Henry and Eleanor for 30 years. She smiled when she saw him come through the door. "Good morning." "Henry, what can I help you find today?" she asked. "I need books about the war," Henry said, "about people who helped children escape from the Nazis, about the resistance fighters in London." Mrs. Patterson looked surprised. Henry had never asked for history books before. He usually borrowed mystery novels or books about gardening. "Of course," she said. "Follow me to the history section." Henry spent the entire morning reading. He learned about ordinary people who had done extraordinary things during the war. He read about families who had hidden children in their basements and attics. He read about young people who had risked their lives to guide children to safety. The more Henry read, the more he understood what Eleanor had lived through. She had been part of something much bigger than he had realized. She had been a hero. At lunchtime, Henry was still reading when an elderly man sat down at the table across from him. The man looked to be about Henry's age, with white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Excuse me," the man said quietly. "I could not help but notice the books you're reading. My name is George Miller. I lived through the war in London." Henry looked up from his book. "My name is Henry Thompson. My wife recently told me that she was part of the resistance during the war. She helped children escape from danger." George's eyes widened. "What was your wife's name during the war?" "Eleanor Whitmore," Henry said. George sat back in his chair, looking amazed. "Eleanor Whitmore. I knew about her work." Everyone in the resistance knew about Eleanor Whitmore. She was one of the bravest people alive. Henry felt his heart beating faster. "You knew about my wife." "Not personally," George said, "but I knew about what she did. The group she worked with saved dozens of children. What your wife did was incredibly dangerous. If the soldiers had caught her, they would have killed her immediately." George leaned forward. "Your wife was a hero, Mr. Thompson. What she did saved innocent lives. Many of those children she helped are probably grandparents themselves now, living good lives because of what Eleanor did." Henry walked home from the library feeling different than he had in days. When he opened the front door, he heard Eleanor crying in the kitchen, but these tears sounded different from the sad tears he had been hearing all week. Henry found Eleanor sitting at the kitchen table holding a letter. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "Henry," she said, looking up at him, "look what came in the mail today." The envelope was addressed to Eleanor Whitmore. Inside was a letter written in neat handwriting and a photograph of a large family. Henry could see 3 generations in the picture: a grandmother with grey hair, her adult children, and several young grandchildren. Eleanor handed Henry the letter with shaking hands. He read it slowly. "Dear Eleanor, my name is Lucy Thompson. You saved my life when I was 5 years old during the war. I have been searching for you for 40 years to say thank you. I remember you holding my hand when you walked me to the safe house. I remember you telling me that everything would be okay. Because of you, I lived to grow up, get married, and have children of my own. Now I have grandchildren too. You are my hero. I hope this letter finds you well and happy. With all my love and gratitude, Lucy." Henry looked at the photograph again. The grandmother in the picture had the same dark eyes as the little girl in Eleanor's old photograph, the same little girl who had clutched a stuffed rabbit while Eleanor led her to safety. "She remembers me," Eleanor whispered, "after all these years. Little Lucy remembers." Henry sat down beside his wife and took her hand. For the first time since learning about Eleanor's past, he felt like he understood who she really was. This was not a woman who had lied to him. This was not a woman who had deceived her family. This was a woman who had saved lives when she was barely more than a child herself. This was a woman who had carried the weight of history on her shoulders for 6 years, protecting her family the only way she knew how. Henry looked at Eleanor with completely new eyes. The woman sitting beside him was not a stranger. She was the same kind, brave, loving person she had always been. Now, he just understood where that strength and kindness had come from. "I am proud of you," Henry said quietly. "I am proud to be married to such a brave woman." Eleanor smiled through her tears and squeezed his hand. For the first time in weeks, the house felt warm again. Henry moved his chair closer to Eleanor at the kitchen table. He reached across and took both of her hands in his own. Her fingers felt cold and small, but familiar. These were the same hands that had made him breakfast every morning for 60 years, the same hands that had held their babies when they were born, the same hands that had comforted him when his father died. "I am sorry, Eleanor," Henry said, using her real name for the first time. The name felt strange on his tongue, but also right somehow. "I was hurt and confused when you first told me the truth. But now I understand. You did not lie to me. You protected me the only way you knew how." Eleanor looked into Henry's eyes. She had been so afraid that telling him about her past would destroy their marriage. For weeks, she had watched him struggle with the truth about who she really was. "I was so scared you would stop loving me if you knew about my past," Eleanor said softly. "I thought you might think I was a different person entirely." Henry squeezed her hands gently. "My darling Eleanor, I fell in love with your kind heart, your gentle spirit, and your incredible strength. Those things were always real, no matter what name you used. You are the same wonderful woman I married 60 years ago." That afternoon, Henry called William and Emma. This time, his voice sounded different when he spoke to them. He sounded proud. "Your mother would like to see you and the grandchildren," Henry said. "She has more to tell you about her past. But this time it will be different. This time, we want to celebrate what she did." William arrived first with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Thomas and Mary. Emma came shortly after with her 3 daughters. The house felt full of life again for the first time in weeks. Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair with all 5 grandchildren gathered round her feet on the living room carpet. Their faces looked up at her with curiosity and love. "Grandchildren," Eleanor began, "I want to tell you about what your grandmother did when she was a young woman during the war." She told them about helping children escape from danger. She explained how she and other brave people had given the children new names and new families to keep them safe. She showed them the old photographs and pointed out different children she had helped. 8-year-old Thomas, William's son, listened with his mouth open in amazement. "Grandma Eleanor, you are like a superhero," he said when she finished the story. Eleanor laughed for the first time in weeks. The sound filled the house with joy. "I was not a superhero, Thomas. I was just a young woman who did what felt right. When people need help, we should try to help them if we can." 6-year-old Mary raised her hand like she was in school. "Grandma, were you scared?" "Yes, I was very scared," Eleanor admitted. "But sometimes we have to be brave even when we are frightened." The children needed help, and that was more important than being afraid. Over the next few weeks, the family spent many evenings together talking about Eleanor's past. William apologized to his mother for being angry. Emma hugged her and said she was proud to be the daughter of such a brave woman. "We want to learn more about this part of history," Emma said. "Can we visit the War Museum together?" The following Saturday, 3 generations of the family drove to the War Museum in the city. Eleanor walked through the exhibits with her children and grandchildren. explaining what life had been like during those difficult years. A museum historian named Dr. Roberts spoke with Eleanor privately. "Mrs. Thompson, your story is exactly the kind of history we need to preserve. Would you be willing to record your memories so that future visitors can learn from your experiences?" Eleanor agreed. Over several visits to the museum, she told her complete story to Dr. Roberts. Her memories became part of the museum's collection, helping to teach young people about the courage of ordinary citizens during the war. Spring turned to summer. Henry and Eleanor began planning something special. Their 61st wedding anniversary was approaching, and they wanted to celebrate in a meaningful way. "I would like to renew our wedding vows," Eleanor said one evening as they sat in their garden. "This time, I want to use my real name." On a sunny Saturday in June, Henry and Eleanor stood in their local church surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and many friends from the community. Eleanor wore the same blue dress she had worn to their 60th anniversary celebration the year before. The minister asked Eleanor to state her full name. "Eleanor Rose Whitmore Thompson," she said clearly, her voice strong and proud. Henry smiled as he repeated his own vows. "I have loved you as Rose, and I love you as Eleanor. You are the same wonderful woman either way." After the ceremony, the family returned to Henry and Eleanor's house for cake and celebration. As the sun set, Henry and Eleanor danced slowly in their living room to the same song they had danced to at their original wedding. "Are you happy?" Henry whispered as they swayed together. Eleanor smiled, feeling lighter than she had in decades. "I am free," she said. "For the first time in 60 years, I am completely free to be myself." Love had won over fear. Truth had brought them closer together than ever before. Eleanor was finally home.